Hello, this is Daniel Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. This video is sponsored by Southern New Hampshire University and their online Bachelor of Science in Computer Game Design. More on that later. Having completed the video on what made no sense about NICs, I realized that there was also something that was annoying me about making no sense about Pyro. And that was not because it wasn't in lore, but that it wasn't in the game. And CIG has in various ways said that they are going to be adding it to the game, or actually adding it back to the game. So what this video is about is a discussion about the best way to add it back to the game, because it's an asset, and if they implement it well, it can be a well-utilized asset for the game. And about underutilized asset, that brings us to today's sponsor, Southern New Hampshire University. The Federal Reserve Bank estimates that over 37 million American working-age adults have unfinished college degrees. The reasons why these degrees are unfinished are varied, but can be broadly described as life got in the way. And for them, that unfinished degree is an underperforming asset, something that they may have invested possibly years of time and thousands of dollars and may still even be making payments on. But it is likely that many of them are saying that old college degree doesn't represent where I am now and even less of where I want to be. But up to 3/4 of a bachelor's degree can be completed using transfer credits, and that goes for any of the 200 online degree granting programs that SNHU offers, including their Bachelor of Science in Computer Game Programming and their Bachelor of Arts in Computer Game Art. And with radically affordable per-unit costs and coursework entirely online and available 24/7, it is a lot easier to work around your life rather than it getting in the way of converting that underperforming asset of an uncompleted degree into something to help you meet your career goals. If this sounds interesting, please visit snhu.edu/raysguide. Fill out the form and you can talk to a real person who can answer all your questions about transfer credit or anything else about how SNHU can help you get to where you want to be. That's snhu.edu/raysguide. So, switching from SNHU in Manchester, New Hampshire to CIG in Manchester, England, what to do about the missing element in Pyro. So what is the missing element in Pyro? Well, it is the answer to the question, why is everything so downtrodden and abandoned in Pyro? Why aren't there even a few new things brought in from Stanton or elsewhere? Why is Citizen Prosperity having so much trouble getting outside interests to invest in the system? The answer is clear to anyone who has an even elementary understanding of the game lore. Pyro is a flare star that regularly scorches the entire system. Attempts to terraform saw only limited and temporary success, as did attempts at establishing a mining infrastructure. So the thing that's missing from Pyro are the flare storms that make the whole situation make sense. Now, in the very early Pyro Playground Tech preview 2 years ago, we did have them. They would occur about every 45 minutes or so and last about 5 to 10 minutes. And your ship would be disabled, and if you went outside, you would get a Tier 3 head and chest injuries, and overall health drop to about 71. They were dropped before Pyro went live, and I think it is because they were too regular, too annoying, and too survivable, and insufficiently cataclysmic. In other words, they added little to the game other than an occasional nuisance. Realistic natural disasters are different than that. They are infrequent and unpredictable enough that people start to not worry about them. They don't think about them day to day. They start to think that they're no big deal, that they can build on the fault line and in the floodplains, that they can put off protections and preparations. That natural disaster isn't reason to hold back on building our grand schemes. And so the long absence of actual Pyro flare storms is actually a benefit, a realism. But it means that when they return, it needs to be big and really knock Pyro for a loop, to serve as a reminder that it's not nice to fool Mother Nature. Also, a well-implemented natural disaster event has the potential to fill a gap in the event content of the last year or so. In the last year, we've had essentially 2 types of events. We've had single-use events, such as the resource race and this Amelia Bod finale. They have little to no reusability of most of the work to create them. Then there are events like Hathor Mining and the ADS Onyx missions that are presumably still respawning every 2 hours, but does anybody even care against the sparkle of the thing that's new this month? So there is plenty of reusability with them, but little immediacy. But the natural disaster archetype can be reused. In fact, it is expected it will be happening again, but not right away. And except perhaps for the first time, they should not be an announced event. CIG shouldn't be saying that next month there will be a flare storm. Rather, it should be that players are expecting something else to be happening this month, and then there is also a flare storm. But then there should be hints in the game, as well as those hints turning out to occasionally be false alarms, because that too is how real natural disasters work. And of course, the new implementation of flare storms should take advantage of all the new features of the game. And as time goes by, new features, as they become available, they should be made part of it too. So, for example, right now, we still don't have passenger transport missions in the game, so a currently implemented flare storm event can't include them. But when they do exist, they should be a big part of flare storm events, both in terms of pre-event evacuations and post-evac resettlement. But I wouldn't want it to be held up for whenever we actually get passenger transport. So let me break down what I'm seeing this being. First of all, Phase 0A. This covers all the time between the actual flare storms. The Terran Academy of Sciences, with funding from Citizens for Prosperity, maintains a pair of data monitoring posts at the L4 and L5 points of Pyro 1. These are roughly the size of a Drake cutter, might even be created by repurposing a disabled Drake cutter towed into place. These are frequently in need of servicing. Sometimes it needs a new fuse, sometimes the use of a multi-tool repair tool on the power plant, sometimes replacing a component with an onboard spare, sometimes rebooting, sometimes recalibration, etc. Phase 0B, worrisome readings. When the system is restarted after repair, the mission giver over comm seems kind of surprised by the readings and might ask you to do an additional recalibration step, or suggest that you might not want to hang around there too long. The degree of concern increases during this phase. Note that at the time, only people that are taking the mission are getting any information at all about the impending flare storm. Phase 1, Watch Warning Alert. Phase 1A is called a Flare Storm Watch, 1B is called a Flare Storm Warning, and Phase C is called a Flare Storm Alert. During this time period, an increasing number of preparation-related missions come about. DFP is mostly interested in bringing in radiation suits, radiation-resistant shelter pods, medical supplies, etc., since part of their core beliefs is to convince people that with preparation and warning, flare storms are nothing to worry about for development of Pyro. Headhunters, though, are mostly interested in getting key personnel and equipment out of the system, and Rough and Ready and others are a combination of those. Once passenger transport is in the game, many of these missions will be transporting people, but until then they will be about transporting critical equipment and possessions. Now, at any point up to here, there is a chance that the entire event was a false alarm and the alerts will be withdrawn. But otherwise, we go to Phase 2, the actual flare storm. It is important for the lore that this be as impactful as possible and last for days. All commerce is shut down, shops are empty, commerce kiosks are non-functional, ATC and freight elevators are not working, lights are off. Radiation suits and radiation treatments are needed even if inside. When traveling through the system, ship components will be failing and needing repair or replacement regularly. Multi-crew ships with spares and dedicated engineering players will be essential. There will only be one type of mission available, and that is emergency medical rescue of people who were caught unprepared or whose preparation measures failed. Get in despite the risk, transport the incapacitated NPC to a med bed to stabilize them, and then transport them, despite the challenges, to an out-of-system medical facility. Phase 3, Recovery. System is no longer risky, but nothing returns to normal until a specified number of repair and resupply missions, and when passenger transport is in the game, return missions are run. The exact number of missions needed for each faction depends on the number of Phase 1 and Phase 2 missions that were successful. In other words, the system is tracking behind the scenes the number of CFP, Headhunters, R&R, etc. missions that were completed during Phase 1 and 2, and that determines how quickly Phase 3 missions will be able to get the commerce running and production going, the stores operating, the stations working, etc. So there is incentive not to ignore those early phases, but it's a hidden incentive. And then when we are back to Phase 0 for perhaps 10 to 20 months, not including the false alarms. Enough time for players to get complacent, and for there to be a contingent of new players for which the next flare storm will be their first. Thus, there is the ability to reuse the flare storm event code without it becoming background noise, and allowing time to refresh with new capabilities to keep it new and up to date. Which brings us finally to our giveaways. We are just days away from the IAE and thus giving away the Stylancer Max in our Grow the Channel giveaway. Also, I'll be buying chips for next year's giveaways for Invictus, as well as next year's IAE Week giveaway, as well as maybe a few other surprises involving Nick, so expect an announcement about next year's giveaway. Remember, one entry per video for all the giveaways. Members are entered automatically. For example, longtime member Brett Abbott for winning the Post Citizen Con Direct giveaway. Hope you're enjoying our Astar Merchantmen, or at least the loaners for them for now. Everyone else, subscribe and comment with a secret word. And the secret word for this video is, how long ago did we last see flare storms in Pyro? Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond with Ray's Guide.